Okay, well, first of all, Haider, I do have a question. First of all, thank you. That's a great parting gift. The question is, can you please keep coming back? The reason is we need VC in this room. I've always found that VC, venture capitalists, are a very good reality filter of some of the dreams we have. So please, and bring then some colleagues that would enrich the meeting. So as we're scaling up the meeting, welcome again. We are going to scale it up even further. So it's good of you to stay, because we're going to the next level now by doing two things that until now we've only talked about, but we haven't actually done it. Number one, we have talked about patients, how important they are, how we should start. Yet, so far, we haven't had a patient voice on stage. We're going to change that with our panel. And the second thing is we've talked about the future of digital being hybrid. It's not a shift from the classical model. Somebody during the coffee said, oh, I'm so glad the reps are not going to die out. No, they're not going to die out. They're going to be augmented reps. So hybrid is the future. Yet we have not seen a single session that's hybrid. Well, welcome, Diane. You're lifting us on two levels because Diane is working at Melanoma UK, a patient organization, and she's joining us live in a hybrid fashion. So how's that for raising the bar? All right. So the topic of the meeting, and I welcome Sandra, I welcome Tim, is about patient centricity. And this is one of those typical pharma buzzwords, right? I always say, my mother doesn't get it, and I was the first chief patient officer, all right? Neither does my uncle or my cousin, because these are typical pharmaceutical words. What is a pharmaceutical word? Pharmaceutical, at least 3 syllables. Centricity, engagement. So if we really want to start with the patient, we're going to ask Diane. Diane, why don't you set the framework, and then we'll fit your framework, not the other way around. What is patient centricity? How do people living with a condition actually even react to that term? Take it away, Diane.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for letting me join you today, albeit virtually. I really am looking forward to this discussion. So, because it's so emotive, the words patient centricity, because what does it actually mean? The word patient centricity doesn't really mean a lot to many patients because it's not fully understood. What you've just said there was pharma words, it's management speak, and if they are not fully understood by a patient, how can we even start to measure it?
Wow, that's about getting to the point. Thank you very much, Diane. I knew you were going to be strong, but okay, so that puts our feet on the ground. And I can tell you, the best working definition, I checked it with Diane, and I've checked it with my uncle and my mother and my cousin, is beginning to be practiced by some companies. It is telling people that you will work with them, for them. Let me repeat that. We've always worked for patients, but many of us haven't worked with patients, and that's the whole thing. So, Diane, do you still feel like a few weeks ago that that's a good summary that people could understand?
Yeah, absolutely. Leading on to, following on from that first introduction, sorry if I came across a little bit hard then, but being a patient myself with skin cancer, but also dealing as a patient organisation, we have to put the patient at the heart of everything we do. And that is the definition. So patient centricity is putting the patient dealing with a cancer diagnosis right in the middle, right front and centre of everything we do. Get fully consulted on the cancer journey, and from the outset, let the language used be easy and understood and meaningful. So yes, we are still in this same, and I've got a lot to say on this topic, so you need to stop me because we get really emotional over the words of patient centricity, especially with pharma, because we need to be involved up front and centre and at the beginning, not when it's too late.
Okay, if it gets too bad, we'll pull the plug and say, I'm losing you there. Okay, anyway. No, thank you very much, Dan. So remember that, working with patients for patients. Now, how do you actually start measuring that in pharma, right? And I will also ask Diane later, how do patients measure what we do, right? Those are two different things. Let me take an example. Who in this room has children? At least there you are productive. Good. So let's say you have to choose a school for your children, right? And we've all faced that, right? We've all faced. So how do you actually pick a school? What you want is value, right? But you don't know what the value will be to your kid, who is a unique individual, who you know better than anybody on the planet, because you've been changing the diapers, feeding. But you want value for your kid. So how are you going to judge the school? We don't have output. Oh, yes, you have school statistics that say X% goes to university, but that's a low percentage. It doesn't really apply. Then they have standards say, well, but we increased the grades by so much, but maybe that's not for your daughter. So what we generally do is we go to input measures. What is the effort? How many kids per class? How many teachers? How much study time? How much personal coaching? Those are all input measures. Now, the transfer to patient, working with patients is one-to-one. Historically, we have been measuring input. As head of medical worldwide, I had vanity metrics like Gemma said yesterday. 1,000 people in my ASCO symposium must be good. That's input. It means nothing, right? So now we are seeing a 2x2 matrix. No copyright to Boston University here. But it's not just input in quantitative, how many doctors on seat, how many patients clicked on my website, how many this. It's also about quality. So now we have input quality, that's new. But what is beautiful, and my two colleagues will talk about this, is we're beginning to get a grip on output. What is the actual result of what we measure? And I'll start with Tim, because one of the biggest beliefs we've always had in medicine, education leads to behavioral change. We've applied it for decades to doctors. If only we educate the doctors, they will do what we want. And if they don't, they're just too stupid and need more education. As a doctor at the receiving end, I can confirm. Now we do the same thing with patients. Diane, if you're not doing what I ask, I just need to educate you a little bit better. So anyway, Tim, tell us how you would measure output, and then I'll come back to you, Diane.
Thanks, Lode. And I think the principles of measuring, whatever we want to call it, let's call it patient centricity because that's the title of the talk, apply not just to pharma, they apply to the whole of the healthcare industry, applies to health providers like the NHS, health insurers. Basically, anyone involved in healthcare needs to be working with patients. Even the word patients is an emotive word. We need to say people, really.
Yep.
And I'd like to propose three questions, really, that we should ask ourselves to test, to measure the output, to see if we really are working with and for patients. The first is, are we improving people's understanding about their health and treatment? Mm-hmm. And that's very measurable. The second is, are we building trust? And again, that's very measurable. We can use net promoter scores, and we can see if people trust our organizations and us as individuals. And then the third thing is, are we able to demonstrate an impact on outcomes, whether that's on an individual level or at a population health level? And again, very measurable, particularly with the emergence of big data. But because Cognitant has a real, our mission is about empowering patients with information and tools to enable them to understand their health and achieve better outcomes. I'd like to sort of really focus on that first thing about how do you measure
understanding,
whether we are able to improve understanding. And as you say, we've got a long history of education. We've done a literature review. There are lots and lots of publications that can incontrovertibly demonstrate that education has an impact on health, whether it's fetal mortality, whether it's managing diabetes with the Desmond program and Daphne programs. And a really interesting study in San Francisco with HIV patients showed that if you deliver an avatar-based digital education program to patients with HIV, it not only increases compliance with therapy, which is a difficult thing to affect, as we talked about before, but it also has an impact on CD4 counts, very measurable.
Okay.
So there are ways that we can not only measure the immediate self-reported impact of education, but there are longer-term outcome measures that enable us to be able to demonstrate whether a program has had an impact on understanding and therefore on outcomes.
That's wonderful. I wish I had that also for HCPs, the value. But so thank you. So that's an important one. Two things that you warned me about that we need to make sure you don't start suffering from metricitis, metrics, and just measuring for metrics. And Tim's very good at saying, no, measure one thing, stick with it. So be very careful. Don't go on a what was it, a goose chase or what it was?
Wild goose chase.
Yeah, just to go measuring just for the sake of measuring. And we see that in some companies. And the second thing, and this brings us back to Diana, none of your metrics, no matter what they are, have any meaning unless that meaning is created with patients, which brings me back to you, Diane. How do people with a condition, because Tim is right, we still use the word patient, but you're a person first. How do you measure patient centricity? And in your role, both as a person living with a skin cancer and at Melanoma UK, have you seen a change? Because we've been talking about this on stage for a few years, as Haider said, but have you actually seen something changing on your end?
Yeah, what I'd like to say, coming back to Tim's point, the bit about a patient wanting good, clear communication, it's not just, we love communication and passing it down to our patients, but it's got to be supported different stages of their journey. One size doesn't fit all. You know, you've got different stages of cancer, and people are going through different levels of the disease, so we need to fit things to that level, not just, you know, one set of communication. You know, this is about giving people, and I do say people because a patient is not defined by their disease. So we must look at the wording that we use here. And people want hope. They want to be seen as an individual and not just useful for data. However, coming back to how we measure it, we simply listen. We listen to what's going on within the community. As I said before, patient centricity is very emotive for our community. And, you know, what is it you're looking to achieve? That's my question back to everyone in the room. If you want to put the patient in part of everything that you're doing, tell us a little bit sooner what you want to achieve. Don't just see them as a data set. I think we've got a long way to go with Pharma, but we have come on leaps and bounds over the years. For things like this, thank you to Cognitant, because they have put us on stage, virtually, but when you've introduced us and said we're the only stroke patient organisation to be in the room over the last 2 days, that speaks volumes. It must speak to people in the room to say, why are we talking about patient centricity when actually there's one patient on a screen, and is that really putting us at the heart of what you do? But thank you to Cognitant for giving this opportunity. But you know, Pharma, let's not beat Pharma up because that's not what we're about. We have gone through lots of compliance through Pharma, so I understand why you talk to the patient organisation, sometimes more than patients, because of your internal insane compliance. But you know what, I get it, but what you are doing more of, which is brilliant, is getting us involved with patient focus groups, attending advisory board meetings, asking for patient feedback if you need any information via surveys. But the big thing is involving patients in the productive educational material. They will tell you what they need, and that's really for the patient and with the patient involved.
Wonderful. Hey, thank you very much. By the way, you can endorse a company. We can't promote to you. It's not fair. Anyway, so I take what you said. First of all, thank you for acknowledging that our efforts are seen by you, because in the end, that's why we do it. And I noted 4 things. For us to be noted by you as being patient-centric, whatever we do has to be relevant to your members. Every member needs to feel it's adapted to their need, not one fits all. I can't read my own writing. Oh yeah, you want to be involved all the way, and a lot to the listening, right? It comes back to your first point, get us in early, keep us in, and keep talking. So thank you very much. That is very good. And for those who don't know, there are tools that have now been co-created with patients group like Melanoma UK and others that are publicly available. One of them from an IMI, Innovative Medicines Institute, which came to 72 metrics for patient engagement. So don't go and spend money on reinventing the wheel. Just go to that and pick them. And we're currently co-developing with patients a metrics tool selector so that for your activity, an algorithm helps you say, these are probably the few ones we should do. Now, all of that is great, input, output, all of that, but we're missing something, and that's what Sander's going to talk about. There's one fundamental type of patient engagement measurement that we haven't talked about. Sander, take us there, please.
Probably more than one, because we're missing quite a lot, I would say. I think, going back to your point, Tim, to start with the fact that if you're having amazing content, but you haven't understood the behavior change fully, and you don't understand the learning that people are going through, you're going to miss your mark anyway, because that beautiful content may simply not be appropriate for that specific patient. So I think when you think of the type of research we're doing, a lot of the research we've done historically has been observational, which is comfortable. You're a bit, sorry, you're a bit more at a distance. I think we're beginning to do more behavioral research where we go deeper into the experience. Compare it to a supermarket. Observational research, you know the layout of the supermarket, you know what's being offered. Behavioral means you know that they're first going to the grocery section, but you still don't know why. And that's the last part, and that's really important. It's the attitudinal piece, which is the most difficult one. And our classic methodologies often lead us to more the observational and behavioral, but the attitudinal needs a dialogue. It goes to Diane's point, and it goes to your point about being with patients. You'll need to have a conversation, and you'll need to have it on an ongoing basis because these things are not static in any way. So I think really challenging ourselves, not only to apply these 3 levels of research because they have their own value at all these levels, but also making sure they're always considered. When someone comes to leadership with a new proposal, my question nowadays is, okay, where are the insights? Have you talked to patients? Have you gone to the patient association, and what is their feedback? Because too often we're following technology because it offers us an opportunity. We haven't really verified what it truly means to the customer. And one model that I would invite everyone to look at, it's from the Harvard Business School. It's called the jobs to be done model. I find it very useful to structure our thinking at Novartis, because the other thing that comes into play is really being very disciplined across this and making sure that what jobs to be done does, it breaks down what people are trying to achieve in the smallest way possible. So if I'm going to the grocery store, why am I there? Am I just spending time because I'm bored, or do I need to buy essentials? Am I browsing or not? Those types of things. So I think there's making sure you have the right models going in, that you really understand what is the patient experience. We like to say people living with a chronic disease. I work mostly in the immunology space where things are really not curable in most cases. So using the right language before you even go into this research and gather your insights, making sure that it's not just observational, but really moves to these other 2 levels.
Thank you, Sander. And this is a great link back to what Haider said. It's a little bit like what you call observational is big data.
Yeah.
Understanding the why is the thick data.
Yeah.
Now, I could challenge you and say, but Sander, what's the role of digital? And I'll ask Diane. I could just sit down with Diane. She'll tell me everything. Why do I need digital? So, because she knows the whole community, they talk to her. Why is there this complementary?
It's an interesting one. Well, first of all, digital makes it a lot more efficient because
Diane
Diane might get very
You're not
busy.
efficient.
And talking to 800 Dianes or 8,000 Dianes would be quite challenging. So I think digital allows us to become more interactive and engage more directly, certainly with people that are prescribed our medications. And it allows us to have more of a diversity and breadth of insights. And so I think someone like Diane is quite a unique individual who has a lot of patient conversations, right? And that is very valuable. At the same time, I also need to understand how it is for someone who may be very isolated and much harder to reach. So it's about diversity of insights, understanding Diane's perspective, and then translating that to the day-to-day reality of someone who might not be engaging with Diane because they're just on their own.
No, that's a great point. Tim, you want to say something?
Well, it's scale, and it's also personalization. You know,
Scale person, and I would add diversity, right? Because
For me, that diversity piece is really important.
just question to you quickly, Diane, how many people in the UK who have melanoma are actually part of Melanoma UK? Is it 15%? Is it 85%? Do you actually know?
We've got about, I'd say, about 60% of patients who liaise with us, whether that be phone call, email, online. We've got private Facebook groups, so we've got access to patients in whatever way they choose to link with us. That comes back to one size fits all. So, but I totally get Sanders' point. We have embraced technology, and we will continue to do that. I mean, we've had to do it through COVID. So, yes, if you had 8,000 of me out there, the world would be a scary place. However, there are a lot of patients who don't want to jump on a call and who just like to maybe liaise with you on an email. So there's lots of different things that we've got to do. But yes, we are fully up on embracing technology. So yeah.
So thank you for that. And it comes back to Sandra's point. It's very important that you don't listen only to one source. So it's quite exceptional for any patient organization to have 60% of the people with that condition feeding into that. That's really exceptional. For the big conditions, talk diabetes, we're talking in the single digits, the lower single digit, right? For the very rare diseases, we're going to the 85 plus. But that's why it's so important for the diversity and for the relevance, as Tim said, to make sure that you have the listening from the different sides. Okay.
Yeah, if I could mention one point that
Please.
relates to that, I think I've worked a lot on AI and that type of implementation of that technology. I think what we're recently seeing more and more clearly is the fact that the human factor is so important to patients. I think automation, digital is really good as first responder or immediate access to information. But the minute it gets more complex, not every patient, but many patients, they do want to have the reassurance that they can talk to a human when they need to. I think sometimes patients feel almost a little trapped in the digital world because they are fearing that they can't get out and get to a human when they need to. So I think we need to reassure them. And really, you said hybrid model, augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. And I think patients really do need to be reassured sometimes that we haven't lost track of the human factor in all that digital.
Actually, that's a very good one. I'm going to ask you that question. Diane, when COVID hit, a lot of people, including in your community, simply couldn't go to the doctor, right? So we went into this virtual medicine. And a lot of people in government liked it because it's cheaper, right? Pharma loves it because it's easier. What do your people tell you? Do they want to go back to the office, so to speak, the equivalent of employees going back to do they want to go back into the doctor's office? Do they feel hybrid? Give us a feel of, in your community, understanding it's unique, how is the feel?
One size doesn't fit all. Honestly, the amount of patients that had to change the way they did things. So it was a real struggle, but now, 2 years on, I mean, we simply introduced a Zoom call on a Thursday night with our patient community. And it was so well received. We were only meant to do it for about 6 weeks, just to kind of get over the initial hump of lockdown. We're 2 years on, and these calls are going to carry on now for the rest of my life while I'm here doing what I'm doing. Because the patients love just jumping on a call, seeing someone that they've started relating to. They don't want to pick up a phone and they don't want to email, but they just want that hour of work, of being in a community of other people knowing what they're going through. So a lot of them have embraced technology because they've had to, but they don't want that to be the norm anymore. They like to dip in to wherever they feel is best for them at that time. So we've got a real mixed bag at the moment with our community. Some love it, some still will never go down the technology route. They like to see the face-to-face, they like to see the doctor. The problem we've got is there's not, when you look at the waiting list now in the UK, for a skin cancer check, you're talking potentially 12 months. So we've got to try and deal with that anxiety from a patient's point. And if there is some technology that can help them, then we're asking them to at least give it a try.
Thank you. Comes back to Tim's point about treating every person and meeting them where they want to meet, right? And I think that's an important one. Don't assume that you know what is the best way to communicate to a patient community, right? It's going to be different. Some people have discovered Zoom. When COVID hit, the first thing we did in the first month was simply getting patient organizations to get to understand how Zoom works. And that's not different from most employees, frankly, because a lot of people were not doing video calls before. Now it's an asset, but it doesn't mean that they only want to be engaged by Zoom, right? So we're kind of wrapping up here. So let me start. Now I'm going to give the last word to you, Diane, so that you start and end. I'm going to ask Tim and then Sander, what is the take-home message that you would like to give the audience regarding measurement of patient centricity?
Well, I guess looking at the big picture, our healthcare services are overwhelmed, and as Davidek mentioned, in some parts of the world, 50% of the world don't have access to basic healthcare. So I think it's upon all of us to see what can we do to improve people's ability to manage their own health and to be able to make the most of limited resources. And so I think all of us, who we work for, need to see how can we improve patients' understanding about their health so that they can manage their own health more effectively. And I think that's very measurable, and that demonstrates that you're really in it for the patient, that you're really in it for the person.
Thank you, and thank you for uniquely demonstrating that by saying, I will not go on podium if I don't have a patient with me. Thank you for that. That's a tradition breaker here. Sander.
Yeah, so in order to measure impact, you first need to be very clear of where you're planning to have impact. And in order to plan that, you need to really understand the situation. And we live in a world of diseases and treatments. Most people just want to live their lives, and they don't want to be reminded of their disease and their treatment all the time. And so it goes back to really, in your research, setting the really clear baseline, talking to patients, understanding their reality. Most of us in the room are not people living with a chronic disease, and we need to understand our own biases when we plan these things. And so good planning, good insights before you even go on the journey, for me, is essential.
Okay, thank you. This comes back to the very first point by Dario. Start by asking the customer. So we'll also end by asking the customer. Diane, any parting advice that people can start doing tomorrow?
Yeah, I think just to reiterate, before you anything, just stop and ask yourself if what you're doing is really putting the patient at the heart of everything. Get us involved, get the patients and the patient organisations involved as soon as possible. We want to get involved with you, so please just ask. And the final thing is, please stop using buzzwords that only make sense to pharma.
Okay. Thank you so much. We want to work with you and for you, Diane. Thank you. Bye-bye. So thank you for the session.